Andrew Jackson. You know, the face on the $20 bill? He was called the People's President. But was he really a hero for the common man? Or was he a tyrant who pretty much bulldozed the Constitution? His legacy is a total battleground, and today we are diving right into the middle of that fight.
This right here, this quote, is everything. It's from his famous veto of the National Bank, and it's the absolute key to understanding his appeal. He positioned himself as the one guy, the only guy, who would stand up for regular people against a corrupt, powerful elite. And that wasn't just some campaign slogan, it was the bedrock of his entire political identity.
So who was this guy, really? To get a handle on his presidency, we first have to grapple with the man himself. And let me tell you, he was a walking, talking contradiction. Just a complete paradox. I mean, look at this. On one side, you have the legend, right? The toughest nails frontier hero, born in a log cabin, a true self-made man. But on the other side, well, the reality is pretty different. He became an incredibly wealthy plantation owner, a slaveholder with a legendary temper, who would go on to stretch the power of the presidency like nobody before him. This massive contradiction is the key to his whole story.
Now, Jackson's road to the White House wasn't exactly a straight line. In fact, it was a really bitter defeat back in 1824 that lit the fuse for the political dynamite that would launch him into office 4 years later.
Okay, so picture this. It's 1824, and the political scene is a total mess. The old party system has crumbled, so you've got 4 guys running for president. Andrew Jackson gets the most popular votes and the most electoral votes, but, and this is the key, he doesn't get a majority. That throws the whole thing to the House of Representatives. And who happens to be the Speaker of the House? Henry Clay. He throws his support behind John Quincy Adams, and, what do you know, Adams turns around and names Clay his Secretary of State.
Well, you can just imagine, Jackson's supporters went ballistic. They screamed from the rooftops that this was a corrupt bargain. The accusation was simple, powerful, and it stuck. Adams and Clay cut a backroom deal to steal the presidency. That single accusation crippled the Adams presidency from day one and became the perfect rallying cry for Jackson's movement for the next 4 years.
And Adams really didn't help his own case. In 1828, he signed off on a massive tariff, a tax, that was great for northern manufacturers but absolutely crushed southern planters. The South was so furious they nicknamed it the Tariff of Abominations. It created this huge wave of anger, which was basically the political rocket fuel Jackson needed to sweep into the White House in the next election.
So once he's in office, Jackson governs exactly how he campaigned, like a fighter. His presidency really boils down to 3 epic battles against 3 powerful opponents. And these fights would fundamentally change the course of the country.
Battle number 1? It exploded over that very same tariff. South Carolina, led by, get this, Jackson's own vice president, John C. Calhoun, declared the federal law null and void within their borders. Calhoun came up with this radical nullification theory, arguing that if a state thought a federal law was unconstitutional, it could just ignore it. This was way more than a protest. It was a direct challenge to the very existence of the United States.
All this tension came to a head at this big political dinner, in what became known as a Battle of the Toasts. Calhoun went first. He raised his glass with this toast, and the message was crystal clear. For him, the liberty of the states came before the unity of the nation.
Now, Calhoun's toast was a direct shot at the powerful idea, made famous by Senator Daniel Webster, that liberty and the Union couldn't be separated, that you just can't have one without the other. This really set the stage for what the president would say next.
Then, it was Jackson's turn. He stood up, stared his own vice president right in the eye, and delivered this thunderous comeback. And believe me, these weren't just empty words. Jackson went to Congress and got them to pass the Force Bill, which gave him the power to use the military to collect the tariff. The message couldn't have been clearer. For Andrew Jackson, the Union was everything. Jackson's Second Great War was against an institution he absolutely hated, the Second Bank of the United States. He saw it as a corrupt monopoly run by a rich elite. He called it a hydra of corruption that made the powerful even richer at the expense of ordinary folks. When he vetoed its recharter, it was a brilliant political move that his voters absolutely loved. And that brings us to the third and most notorious of his policies, the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Jackson was constantly hearing from land-hungry white settlers, and so he pushed this policy to forcibly relocate all Native American tribes in the Southeast to new territory west of the Mississippi River. He actually argued it was for their own good.
This thing sparked a full-blown constitutional crisis. The Cherokee Nation actually sued and took their case all the way to the Supreme Court, and they won. The court ruled that the state of Georgia had zero authority on Cherokee land. Jackson's response? He basically said, John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. He just flat out ignored the highest court in the land, making their ruling completely powerless.
So you've got these three massive fights, against nullification, against the bank, and against native nations. And as you can probably guess, the fallout, the consequences were enormous. They shaped the country for decades, politically, economically, and, yes, tragically. The most heartbreaking result of his removal policy was an unbelievable human catastrophe. The policy was carried out even after Jackson left office. The U.S. Army rounded up about 15,000 Cherokees, forcing them from their homes. On that brutal march west, in the dead of winter, at least 4,000 people, men, women, and children, died. They died from disease, from starvation, from the cold. That horrific event is now known as the Trail of Tears. The bank war also triggered an economic disaster. See, when Jackson took federal money out of the national bank and put it into smaller, state-level pet banks, it kicked off this wild frenzy of land speculation and inflation. To slam on the brakes, Jackson then demanded that land could only be bought with gold or silver. Well, that popped the bubble. Paper money became worthless, land sales cratered, and just as Jackson was walking out the door of the White House, the entire U.S. economy collapsed into a deep depression. All of Jackson's aggressive moves created an equally aggressive opposition. His critics, who started calling him King Andrew because they saw him as a tyrant, all banded together to form a brand new political party, the Whigs. And you can see the battle lines drawn so clearly here. The Democrats wanted states' rights and a small government. The Whigs wanted a strong federal government and a national bank. Right out of the fire and fury of Jackson's presidency, the modern two-party system we know today was born.
All right, to really, truly understand Jackson's policies, especially something as extreme as Indian removal, we have to zoom out and look at the bigger force that was driving America in the 19th century. And that was this relentless, almost unstoppable push westward.
See, in the American mind back then, the West wasn't just a place on a map. It was an idea. It was a moving target, this promise of a fresh start, of freedom, of opportunity. And Andrew Jackson, our frontier president, didn't just go along with this idea. His policies put it into overdrive, clearing vast amounts of land for white settlement, and it came at the direct and tragic expense of the native peoples who had been there for generations. And that brings us right back to where we started, to the central paradox of Andrew Jackson. There's no doubt he fought for the common white man and took on powerful elites. But he used that exact same populist power to justify policies that caused immense cruelty and suffering. And it leaves us with a question that still echoes today. Whenever a leader claims to speak for the people, you have to ask yourself, which people do they really mean?